The noise was a wall. Not just sound, but a physical force pressing against Lucas Smirnov-Conti's chest, stealing his breath. The stadium lights were 1,000 cruel suns, fragmenting into needles of light that pierced his eyes. The smell of wet grass, sweat, and spilled beer rose like a suffocating mist. Every one of his senses was at war. At the center of that hurricane, Coach Theo Thompson's voice was the thunder tearing through it all. "You didn't hear me, Conti? I said be quiet. What do you think you're doing? Playing with your drawings?" The tablet in Lucas's hands trembled. On it, there were no drawings. There were patterns, vectors, geometries of movement that predicted the opposing defense's collapse with mathematical certainty. He just wanted to show. He just wanted to help. But the words wouldn't come. His mouth was dry, his throat closed. 53 players, men who were mountains of muscle and scars, stared at him, some with pity, others with contempt, most with an uncomfortable indifference, humiliation. It was a color, a bitter metallic taste on his tongue. He felt the world tilt, the colors bleeding into a nauseating blur. He was a miscalculation in the NFL's brutal, perfect system. Wherever you're hearing me from now, anywhere in the world, I want you to pay attention. Subscribe to this channel, because the story of how Lucas silenced that stadium without saying a single word is something you need to hear to believe. Maya Correa's voice, his mother's, had always been his safe harbor, the only sound that could cut through the world's noise. She'd tell how, when Lucas was little, he wouldn't build castles with building blocks. He'd arrange them by color, then by size, then by texture, creating perfect matrices on the living room floor. He wouldn't look at the clouds to see animals, but to understand the logic of their formation and dispersal. The world, for Lucas, wasn't a collection of things, but an infinite system of interconnected patterns. People called him strange. Teachers said he was slow or disinterested because he couldn't meet their eyes and his answers were too literal, devoid of the social dance everyone seemed to instinctively know. The autism diagnosis came late, at 9 years old, and for Maya it wasn't a sentence, it was a map. Finally, there was a name for her son's particular universe. But a map doesn't change the territory. The world continued to be a hostile place for someone who needed order amidst chaos. School was a sensory minefield. The hum of fluorescent lights, the echo of hallways, the unexpected touch of a classmate. Any of it could trigger a meltdown, a shutdown where Lucas's brain simply switched off to protect itself. Maya fought for him with the ferocity of a lioness. She fought for quieter rooms, for teachers who understood that Lucas wasn't disobedient, just different. She fought for them to see the genius behind the silence. It was on television that Lucas found his true refuge, American football. Maya didn't understand it at first. The sport was loud, violent, chaotic, everything that should have tormented him. But one day, she found him in front of the screen, completely still, eyes fixed, not on the ball, but on the movement of the 22 players. He didn't see the brutality. He saw a dance, a living geometry. He began filling notebooks and more notebooks with diagrams, arrows, circles, dotted lines. He mapped the plays, not as he saw them, but as they could be. He saw the weaknesses, the empty spaces, the hidden probabilities in every formation. He wasn't watching a game. He was solving the world's most complex puzzle. To him, a blitz play wasn't an aggression. It was an elegant alteration in defensive symmetry. A deep pass was a perfect parabolic arc. American football became his language, the only one he was truly fluent in. He could spend 12 hours straight analyzing old game tapes, time disappearing, hunger forgotten. In those moments, the noisy world outside ceased to exist. There was only the order, the logic, and the beauty of strategy. Maya understood then. Lucas didn't love American football. He understood it on a level perhaps no one else on the planet did, and that understanding was his peace. The path to turning that passion into a career, however, was paved with misunderstanding and closed doors. The transition to adulthood was a cliff face. The idea of Lucas entering the real world, let alone the hyper-competitive, socially complex environment of professional sports, seemed like a fantasy. Advice came from all sides, well-intentioned but painfully misguided. "He needs to learn to be more normal," said a relative. "Perhaps a calmer job with computers," suggested a career counselor. failing to realize Lucas's brain was already the most powerful supercomputer he could operate. The social pressure was immense. Maya watched her friends' children go to college, date, build lives that followed a predictable script. Lucas, on the other hand, was building universes in his notebooks, universes no one else seemed to value. The first major disappointment came with college applications. Lucas had perfect grades in math, physics, and statistics, but his interviews were disastrous. He couldn't maintain eye contact. His answers were direct and unadorned, and he didn't grasp the social cues to smile or seem enthusiastic. A recruiter from a prestigious university, after seeing his notebooks filled with game analyses, told Maya, "Ma'am, your son is brilliant, no doubt, but football is about leadership, communication, instinct. It's about looking a teammate in the eye in the locker room and inspiring them. I'm not sure he fits." The word "fits" echoed for weeks. It was as if they were trying to shove a uniquely shaped piece into a round hole, and instead of admiring the piece, they wanted to sand it down until it lost its form. Lucas secured a full scholarship to a smaller university, based purely on his academic merit. There, he tried to join the football team as a volunteer assistant analyst. The coach, an old-school man, looked at him with suspicion. Lucas tried to explain a new approach to analyzing the opponent's defensive tendencies, using predictive models he'd developed himself. The coach laughed. "Son, I've been doing this for 30 years. I feel the game here," he said, patting his chest. "I don't need a computer to tell me what to do." It was the first of many silent humiliations. He was the weird kid who stood in the corner of the video room, the one everyone ignored. His ideas, however brilliant, died before they were heard because the packaging wasn't what was expected. The pain of rejection didn't come in tears or shouts, but in an even deeper withdrawal. For Maya, every closed door was a stab to her heart. She saw the light in her son's eyes dim a little each time the world told him, in different ways, that his way of seeing things was wrong. False hope was the worst torture. The promise of a place where his talent would be seen, followed by the harsh reality that society valued conformity over genius. The deepest conflict, however, did not occur in a university boardroom, but in the heart of the NFL. An assistant general manager, Dr. Ella Schneider, a woman who believed in data above all else, stumbled upon an academic paper Lucas had written on the statistical inefficiency of certain defensive formations. Intrigued, she contacted him. There was no traditional interview. She sent him 6 hours of game footage and said, "Tell me something nobody else sees." A week later, Lucas sent back an 80-page analysis that deconstructed the opposing team with surgical precision. He was hired the next day as a junior analyst. For Maya and Lucas, it was as if the sun had finally risen after years. But they didn't know they had entered Theo Thompson's territory. Coach Thompson was a legend, charismatic, intimidating, and with 2 Super Bowl rings to prove his methods. He believed in passion, in motivational shouting, in discipline forged in the fire of adversity. He didn't believe in algorithms. From day one, he saw Lucas not as a resource, but as an irritating anomaly. The conflict wasn't an explosion, but a war of attrition. Thompson chafed at Lucas's need for everything in his workspace to be perfectly aligned. He mocked Lucas for wearing noise-canceling headphones during the loud practices. "What's wrong, Conti? Does the sound of victory bother you?" he'd say in front of the other coaches. The human dilemma was clear. Lucas's genius was undeniable on paper, but his presentation was a direct challenge to the culture Thompson had built. The locker room was a sanctuary of testosterone and social hierarchy, and Lucas didn't speak that language. He didn't participate in the jokes. He didn't understand the sarcasm. And when he did speak, it was to correct a calculation made by the head coach in a meeting, without any social filter. To Thompson, this was insubordination. To Lucas, it was simply the truth. Once, the starting quarterback, Gabriel Adams, a respected veteran, tried to bridge the gap. "Coach, the kid's different, but he sees things we don't." Thompson snapped back, "I need warriors, Gabriel, not robots." The situation reached its boiling point on a rainy Tuesday, during a crucial video session before a big game. The team was struggling to decipher the opposing defense. Thompson was frustrated, shouting at the players. Lucas, silent in the back of the room, saw the pattern. It was a subtle bait, an almost imperceptible shift from the safety that signaled a completely different coverage. It was a trap, and the team was about to fall into it. Heart pounding, he stood up. "Coach," he began, his voice barely audible. Thompson turned. "What is it, Conti?" Lucas pointed to the screen. "The hip angle of number 24. It's wrong. It's a bait. The blitz is coming from the cawing other side." The silence in the room was heavy. Thompson stared at the screen, then at Lucas, and something inside him snapped. Perhaps it was the pressure, perhaps his wounded ego, perhaps the sheer inability to comprehend Lucas's mind. He strode over to the young analyst, his face inches from his. "The hip angle?" he snarled, his voice dripping with contempt. "We're trying to win games and you're giving me dance lessons? Sit down and shut up. Leave football to those who understand it." The public humiliation, the very same one we saw at the beginning, was devastating. Lucas didn't just sit down. He shut down. His body was there, but his mind had retreated to the only safe place it knew: inner silence. In that moment, he was no longer an NFL analyst. He was the 9-year-old boy on the playground alone while all the other children played together. That night, Lucas didn't come home. Maya called dozens of times, panic rising with each unanswered ring. She found him in the dead of night, sitting on a park bench near the stadium, in the light rain, just staring at the darkened arena lights. He wasn't crying. It was something worse. He was empty. "They don't see me," was all he said. And Maya understood that the conflict wasn't between Lucas and Coach Thompson. It was between the way Lucas saw the world and the way the world insisted on not seeing him. The turnaround didn't come with a thunderclap, but with a whisper. In the days following the humiliation, Lucas became a ghost in the training facility. He did his work, compiled data, but offered no further insight. He was broken. The team felt the tension. They won the next game, but it was an ugly victory, one with luck rather than strategy. Gabriel Adams, the quarterback, knew something was wrong. He remembered what Lucas had said in the video room, and as he reviewed the game footage, he saw it. Exactly as Lucas had predicted, the blitz came from the opposite side. Gabriel was hit hard. The play was a disaster. The hip angle wasn't a trivial detail. It was the key to everything. Driven by a mix of guilt and curiosity, Gabriel sought out Lucas. He didn't find him in the analyst's room, but in a small basement storage unit, where Lucas had set up an impromptu workstation, away from everyone. He was surrounded by 3 monitors, his fingers flying across the keyboard, immersed in his world of patterns. Gabriel didn't apologize on the coach's behalf. He didn't offer words of pity. He did something far more powerful. He showed respect. "I saw the game tape," Gabriel said simply. "You were right." Lucas looked up from the monitor, surprised. It was the first time anyone on the team had acknowledged his insight. Gabriel pulled up a chair. "Show me," he said. "Not what the coach wants to see. Show me what you see." And then, the dam broke. For hours, Lucas talked. The words, once trapped, flowed with a clarity and passion Gabriel had never witnessed. He didn't talk about players, but about systems. He described the opposing defense not as a group of men, but as a living organism, with habits, fears, and predictable breaking points. He used metaphors from fractal geometry and chaos theory to explain the game's dynamics. Gabriel didn't understand everything, but he understood the essential. He was in the presence of a genius. A secret alliance began. Every night, after most had gone home, Gabriel met with Lucas. They became a 2-man operation. Lucas provided the pure intelligence, the unseen patterns. Gabriel translated it into action on the field. The change was subtle at first. A slight alteration in a receiver's route, a fraction of a second adjustment to a pass's timing. Small things that the other coaches didn't even notice, but that began to shift the outcome of plays. Their communication was unique. Lucas wouldn't say, "The cornerback is going to blitz you." He'd say, "The probability of a disturbance in Sector 7B increases by 84% if the receiver's pre-snap movement is less than 2 yards. And Gabriel somehow understood. He learned to speak Lucas's language. The silent turnaround wasn't about Lucas adapting to the football world. It was about a small part of that world, personified in Gabriel Adams, finally learning to adapt to Lucas. And that small shift was about to send shockwaves through the league. The small victories began to accumulate, like compound interest. In the next game, The team faced a crucial third down. The roar of the "Yow" crowd was deafening. On the sidelines, Coach Thompson yelled a play. But Gabriel, on the field, saw something that reminded him of his conversation with Lucas. He saw the hip angle. Ignoring the coach's call, he changed the play at the last second, using a code only he and a couple of trusted receivers understood. The result was a perfect 20-yard pass and a first down that silenced the crowd. On the bench, Thompson was furious, but baffled. How did Gabriel know? The victory wasn't just on the scoreboard. It was in the locker room. The players started to notice. Alexei Levi, one of the receivers, approached Gabriel. What was that call? That was genius. Gabriel smiled and just nodded in Lucas's direction, who was in his corner, methodically organizing his pens by color. The seed of curiosity was planted. Slowly, other players began to approach Lucas, not with the arrogance of before, but with cautious respect. Logan Flores, a massive running back, started leaving a specific water bottle by Lucas's table each morning, because he'd noticed it was the only brand he drank. It was a small, almost invisible gesture, but for Lucas, it was an acknowledgement of his existence, an acceptance of his routine. Another symbolic victory came during a practice session. Lucas, feeling a bit more confident in his alliance with Gabriel, approached one of the assistant coaches, a man named Dimitri Anderson, and pointed out a detail in a defensive player's stance. If he moves his left foot 5 centimeters back, he can generate 15% more explosive force based on his center of gravity, Lucas stated matter-of-factly. Anderson, who had heard the rumors about Gabriel's secret weapon, decided to try it. He adjusted the player's stance. In the next drill, the player exploded off the line with a speed that surprised everyone. These small victories created a ripple effect. The team's confidence grew, not just in their own abilities, but in their new, unusual intelligence system. Lucas began participating in small meetings with the offensive squad, led by Gabriel. He didn't speak much, but when he did, everyone listened. He'd draw his geometries on a whiteboard, and slowly, players started to see the game through his eyes. They stopped seeing players and started seeing angles, spaces, and probabilities. The biggest victory for Maya, however, came when she received a call from Lucas after an important win. He didn't talk about the game or the touchdowns. He said, "Mom, today, Logan Flores asked me what my favorite type of music is. I told him I prefer the sound of data being processed. And he laughed, but not at me. He laughed with me." That night, Maya cried. But for the first time in a long time, they were tears of pure joy. Her son wasn't just surviving, he was beginning to belong. The team's playoff run was meteoric, and the legend of the prophet, as some players nicknamed Lucas, began to spread. The deepest reflection, however, was happening within the man who had initiated the entire conflict, Coach Theo Thompson. He wasn't a foolish man. He saw the results. He saw the confidence of his quarterback and the precise execution of plays he himself hadn't designed. He knew where it was coming from, and it gnawed at him. His identity as a tactical genius, built over decades, was being challenged by the very person he had publicly humiliated. One night, unable to sleep before the conference championship, Thompson went to the facility. The lights were out, save for a solitary glow emanating from the basement. He found Lucas in his sanctuary, surrounded by screens displaying a ballet of colored dots and lines. For a moment, Thompson just watched, unseen in the darkness. He saw the intensity, the absolute focus. There was no ego there, just a pure pursuit of order, of a solution. It was a dedication to the game that Thompson, in his own way, recognized. With pride weighing him down like an anchor, he stepped into the light. "Conti," Lucas, startled, his body stiffening. He expected another reprimand, but Thompson's voice was different. It was tired, stripped of its usual bluster. "Show me," the coach said, echoing the very words Gabriel had spoken weeks before. "Show me what you see." Lucas hesitated, then turned one of the monitors towards the coach, and for an hour he explained. He didn't simplify. He delved into the complexity, the mathematics, the beauty of the system as he saw it. Thompson didn't say a word. He just listened. And for the first time, he didn't see the strange, socially awkward young man. He saw the mind that was leading his team to the Super Bowl. When Lucas finished, Thompson simply nodded, a nearly imperceptible gesture. "Keep doing your work." he said, and left. It wasn't an apology, but it was acknowledgement. It was an old general's surrender to a new way of war. For Maya, the reflection was sweeter. Seeing her son in the news reports, a mysterious figure mentioned by analysts as the strategic mind behind the team's miraculous campaign, she thought of all the teachers, doctors, and relatives who had tried to put Lucas in a box. They were wrong. The goal was never to make Lucas fit into the world. The goal was to find the small corner of the world that could expand to fit him. The transformation wasn't in Lucas, but in those around him. They hadn't cured him. They had learned to see. He didn't need to change his nature to be valuable. The world just needed to learn to value his nature. True acceptance, she realized, wasn't tolerating someone's differences. It was celebrating them as a strength. The Super Bowl, the biggest stage in world sports, the noise, the lights, the pressure. It was Lucas's sensory nightmare multiplied by 1,000. But now something was different. He wasn't alone. Gabriel Adams had ensured he had a quiet space backstage. Logan Flores made sure no one bothered him. The team formed a protective bubble around him. He was part of them. The pain and the sensitivity hadn't disappeared, but now he had tools, and more importantly, he had allies. The game was a brutal battle, a war of attrition. With less than 2 minutes left on the clock, Lucas's team was down by 4 points. They had possession, but were pinned deep in their own territory. The opponent, in a masterful move, presented a defensive formation no one had ever seen before. It was organized chaos. The commentators were baffled. On the sideline, Coach Thompson stared at his notes, his face a mask of frustration. His strategies, his experience, everything was useless against it. Time was running out. And then, it happened. In front of 100 million viewers, Theo Thompson did the unthinkable. He turned, scanned the crowd of players and staff, and his eyes found Lucas's. He didn't yell. He just nodded. "Conti, over here, now!" Time seemed to stop. Players parted. Lucas Smirnov Conti walked to the sideline, tablet in hand. "What have you got?" Thompson asked, his voice devoid of any ego, just a desperate plea. Lucas said nothing. He just turned the screen. On it, the opponent's chaotic formation was revealed for what it truly was. A complex pattern, but a pattern nonetheless. And like every pattern, it had a flaw, a single minuscule vulnerability. It was a risky, almost suicidal play that required perfect timing from 3 different players in opposite parts of the field. Thompson looked at the tablet, then at the field, then back at Lucas. He saw the certainty in the young man's eyes. "This is it," Thompson said, not to Lucas but to himself. He called Gabriel. "Forget what I said. The play comes from him." He handed the tablet to Gabriel, who looked at Lucas's diagram and smiled. He understood that language. The final play was a work of art, a ballet of precision in the midst of brutality. To the average viewer, it was a miraculous touchdown. To Lucas, it was the inevitable solution to an equation. When the ball crossed the goal line and the stadium exploded in a sound that could crack the earth, Lucas didn't celebrate. As players wept and embraced, he simply watched the confetti fall from the sky, tracing the arcs and spirals, finding the order in the chaotic celebration. Gabriel was the first to reach him. He didn't hoist him onto his shoulders. He and 2 other players, Alexei and Logan, simply stood beside him, forming a small circle, a human shield against the wave of reporters and cameras, giving him the space he needed. Later in the locker room, as Thompson gave an emotional speech, he stopped, picked up the Super Bowl trophy, and walked over to Lucas. He didn't hand it to the young man. He placed it on the table in front of him. "We wouldn't have gotten this without you, kid," he said. It was no longer about football. It was about one man admitting his mistake and another finally being seen for who he was. The pain of humiliation didn't vanish completely, but it was dwarfed by the blinding light of purpose and acceptance. Sometimes the greatest strength isn't in adapting to the world, but in forcing the world to adapt to your unique vision. If this story touched you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Someone might need to hear that being different isn't a flaw but a superpower waiting to be discovered.